The way I think India should convey this to EU is we are helping you to de-risk vis-a-vis China. You are saying you want to de-risk. You were saying you want to reduce your dependence on China. Well, India is offering itself as an opportunity, but it also means India must make itself attractive. So some tough decisions have to be made at home as well.
Hello and welcome to the Gist on Strategies Global. Good evening, I'm Surya Gangadharan. The Prime Minister is off to Paris on a visit that is seen as high on strategic outcomes. So what are these strategic outcomes and what about the India-French relationship? Where is it going? What is it about? I have with me Mr. Mohan Kumar. He was India's ambassador in Paris for some years. And he was also involved with the negotiations on buying the 36 Rafale fighters that are now in service with the Indian Air Force. Ambassador Kumar, glad to have you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Sir, let's just try and understand the India-France relationship. What is special about it? How is it different from, say, that what we have with the US? What is it that makes France special for India?
So India has about 30-odd strategic partnerships with various countries of various colors and hues. I am of the view that there are very few strategic partnerships with countries which are based on total strategic convergence. So what do I mean by that? One is the philosophical underpinning of foreign policy between India and France is more or less the same. Both countries want to follow an independent foreign policy. Both countries practice strategic autonomy, and both countries are seeking a stable multipolar world. You will find all this in the white paper issued by the French Foreign Office. And I used to joke to my French colleagues that we should just translate it into English and put it out as an Indian white paper. So it is really, the terms used there are very, very similar to what Indians articulate. So that's the first. The second, I think, is the more pragmatic, practical reason. First of all, France chose to establish a strategic partnership with India when India was in the doghouse and was a pariah. This is 1998, following the nuclear tests, when no Western country was willing to send anybody to India nor receive any Indian envoy. Jacques Chirac had the sagacity and the wisdom to say we should not, he used to say in French, let us not ignore the other Asian giant, the first Asian giant being China. So he is the one who's credited with farsightedness to establish the strategic partnership. More importantly, France has done two things which I believe no other country has done. One, they have not zigzagged. They have not blown hot or cold. That is, we supply you for 5 years and then the next 5 years we don't, and then something happens. They have been consistent, and this is important. Second, and I'm going to be absolutely upfront, if you go and tell the French interlocutors that, listen, we will buy this, provided you take into account our concerns about this being supplied to Pakistan, for example, the French will say, okay, we get it. There are not very many powers who do that. But there are many powers which will sell to both India and Pakistan. So I think for these reasons, I think, and I hope I'm not suffering from the traditional localitis that afflicts ex-ambassadors to France and current ambassadors to France, I hope I'm being objective when I say that this strategic partnership, which is based on both philosophical underpinnings and practical considerations, has stood the test of time. They have not let us down. It's as simple as that. And for me, that is the touchstone for a reliable strategic partner.
But the French do sell military hardware to Pakistan. I recall submarines at some point. I'm not sure if they still do, but they did sell submarines to Pakistan.
They have done it from time to time without any significant impact on our defense posture or on our defense landscape. And that is in the past. But I think more recently, there is an understanding between the two countries that sensitive military equipment which is sold to India will not be sold to India's quote unquote enemies. So that is the point I wish to make. And we can check the record. You will find that their record is as satisfactory as anyone else.
So let's move forward. Is France key, the key to Europe for India, or is it a purely bilateral relationship?
I find it hard to say that they are the only key to Europe. They are important, but there are other important countries out there: Germany, Italy. The Commission itself is important. France has. European Union has a complicated structure of decision making. Everybody knows that. So I'm not sure we can say France is key. But I think where I would say France is key is that following the departure of the United Kingdom from the EU, France is the only permanent member of the Security Council. It is the only European country with nuclear deterrence. And as you know, we have a big sector of cooperation in the field of nuclear energy with France. So, for example, in the UN Security Council, I can say without fear of contradiction that when it comes to counter-terrorism efforts, when it comes to listing of terrorists, when it comes to helping India join controlled regimes like the Missile Technology Controlled Regime, the Wassenaar Group, support for the Nuclear Suppliers Group, it has been France which has been in the forefront. In the UN Security Council for listing of terrorists, without a doubt, it is France which has taken the lead. And so it is important for India to have one member in the Security Council, along with others like the United States and others, so that we have some comfort. And because France and India see eye to eye when it comes to terrorism, counter-terrorism, sharing of intelligence, I think there is a lot of dependence on France by India in that sense. As far as gateway to Europe is concerned, certainly you can use France, but then it's clear that Germany is also a big giant, really, in economic and investment terms. So I would not argue that France is really the only partner that we have in that sense.
You mentioned nuclear cooperation. The civil nuclear thing hasn't really taken off, has it?
No, it hasn't. I can readily concede that it is stalling. And that is why I'm hoping that the two leaders, when they meet, will discuss the issue of the 6 nuclear plants in Jaitapur in Maharashtra. I think both sides are to blame in varying degrees. I don't want to apportion blame only to one side, but it's true that it is stalling. I think there is an expense factor, and it is proving to be much more expensive than either side thought. So we are looking for concessional terms of finance and so on. There is also an aspect of technology, since French nuclear reactors, the latest, what they call the fast breeder reactor, the latest generation, we will have to see how it works in France itself. And last but not least, we will also have to make sure that local opposition in India is tackled. So I think for a variety of reasons, it's true that this project has stalled. And I think the project could do with some political fillip and political push.
Let's come to Narendra Modi's visit to Paris. Bastille Day celebrations, a lot of talk about strategic outcomes. What, in your view, is likely to be signed, sealed, delivered?
I think there will be serious progress in defense. Defense will top the list, without a doubt, and which is why you find the French National Security Advisor in town. The French National Security Advisor, they call it Conseiller Diplomatique, so it's actually diplomatic advisor to the president, and the Indian National Security Advisor. They have an institutional mechanism called the National Strategic Dialogue. And the major things that these two top officials do is defense, security, counterterrorism, and sharing of intelligence. This is their brief, really. And so the fact that the French National Security Advisor is chosen to come to Delhi just a week before the Prime Minister steps foot in France indicates to me that some finishing touches are being put on a defense deal. Now, whether that deal will be Safran deciding to make engines in India or whether we will acquire Rafale for our Navy, I'm not in a position to say. I have said elsewhere that one of the problems with the Franco-Indian summit is that it happens every year. A decision has been made that the two leaders will meet every year. Every year, there is an expectation for a big ticket item in defense. But I know that that is not how our defense acquisition works. It takes time. So I think I expect serious progress to be made. Whether there will be an agreement or not, I'm not able to confirm. The more important other areas where I think progress will definitely be made, one is green hydrogen. And there I think we can seriously expect help from France so that India becomes the hub for green hydrogen in the future. We can expect green technology from France because they have got some wonderful green technology which they can share with India, which will help India combat climate change. There are then some issues like quantum computing and artificial intelligence where a roadmap has been established by the two leaders when they met in 2022. Progress in those areas can be, measured or taken stock of by the leaders. I also believe there can be a lot of progress in areas like people-to-people ties. I think more Indian students, and I now teach in a university, as you know, Indian students are missing a trick by not looking at France seriously for studies. Perhaps they are put off by this beautiful French language. And I keep joking to my North Indian friends that I'm not asking you to learn Tamil or Malayalam. I'm only asking you to learn French, for God's sake. And I don't see why they shouldn't be learning French. But most courses are now offered in English. And really, there is a lot of scope for Indian students to go, Indian professionals to go and work in France, and for the French students to come and get some exposure in India. The other big issues, frankly, not in terms of outcomes, but in terms, we need to know what is going on in Ukraine, Surya, frankly. I mean, nobody knows that the information that is trickling out is so biased and prejudiced. You can either rely on the Western press or you have to rely on official Russian sources or Belarusian sources. I don't know what to make of it. It would be wonderful for the Indian Prime Minister to get a confidential private assessment of where things stand with regard to Ukraine. It is in India's abiding interest that this war comes to an end. So we must find out with France how this can be done. India holds the presidency of the G20. I think India wants a successful G20 summit, which is not possible without getting a sense from France as to where things are with regard to Ukraine. So a whole lot of things can be discussed, including China, Pakistan, and so on. I'm not including those issues. But in terms of progress, I see incremental progress. There is a space dialogue which has just been instituted between the two countries about a couple of years ago. So again, you need to take stock and find out where that dialogue is going. There is a maritime dialogue. There is a national security dialogue. There is a space dialogue. There is a roadmap for artificial intelligence and quantum computing. This is a very, very heavy agenda, which is very forward-looking. It's not something which is backward-looking, the kind of issues I have put to you. So I think there is a lot to take stock of, which is why I would be more inclined to say that there will be solid incremental progress without maybe fancy, sexy announcements about big ticket items. That is my sense. I could be wrong, but this is my assessment. I'm not even covering things like Indo-Pacific, which are equally important, on which I think France and India do a fair bit of things together.
I just want to touch on the defense technology part, which you briefly referred to. Now, we've seen even with the Americans, the uncertainty surrounding the negotiations on the TOT for the GE engine. I would presume that even the French are, very would like to safeguard their technology, maybe reluctant to part with it. Uh, uh, how do you think these issues play out in the relationship?
I would put it to you that France is perhaps one of the earliest countries to transfer technology. I'm not saying 100% transfer, but there has been significant transfer. If you go back to the Chetak engines that was
Yeah.
manufactured by the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited in the 60s, that was actually the Alouette engine, which was first given under license to HAL. And HAL then made it, HAL then improved upon it. So nobody can deny that there was transfer of technology. Against Scorpion submarines, 2015, there was an agreement for transfer of technology. You can nitpick and say that 100% transfer did not happen. But we are looking for any transfer of significant technology, and then India can improve on it. I think the point I want to make is that even in my time as ambassador, a clear message was given to France that we have to move from a buyer seller relationship to an investor investee relationship. Long term viability of defense relationship with France cannot continue on the basis of just us buying fancy equipment from France, for the simple reason that we will not have money to do so
Yeah.
much. We really, so the message to France, United States, Israel is really, please come here and make in India. Make it for the Indian market, also for exports. We have no problem with it. But you nevertheless have to come here and make it. My sense is that the French have got the message. The French get it. They know that they cannot also look for the next 25 years and keep selling a few scores of Rafales every 5 years, 7 years. Even that took 8 years, as you know. Buying 36 Rafales, it took us 8 to 10 years. So I
Yeah.
don't think that is in their interest. It is not in our interest. So I think there is a convergence that both countries now realize that it has to be made in India. The finer details, you are right. What is the kind of technology they can transfer? What is it they will continue to keep with themselves? How much of it will it be? And we know that France is a trusted partner. So all those things will come into play. So those are, I think, tough negotiations which will happen over time. But the fact that it has got to be made in India is, I don't think we have left any of our partners in doubt, whether they are France, United States, or Israel. They simply have to come and make it here.
Is it your understanding that the French defense industry, which again I understand is largely private sector dominated, is more amenable to perhaps persuasion from their government regarding technology transfers?
I think it's a combination of two things. One, you are right. If you take Rafale as an example, it is actually produced by a company which is family owned. Dassault
Yeah,
family owns
that's true.
Rafale. So it's a family company. On the other hand, that family company is entirely dependent on the French armed force, the French Air Force. It is the French Air Force which keeps this company going. The company did not face any uncertainty for the last 40 years because orders were always booked with the French Air Force. There was tremendous certainty. They didn't have to take any risk. But recently, they have decided that they must start exporting it. They started looking at India, they started looking at Qatar, they started looking at Egypt. And what is interesting is once India bought these Rafale, until then, no foreign country bought it. It's very interesting. Once India bought it, a number of other countries like Egypt and Qatar have started. So they realize that the future in this area actually is about producing it in India, because otherwise they are restricting themselves. If the company is happy to just stay where they are and manufacture for the French Air Force, that is one thing. But my sense is that Dassault company realizes that the future lies in producing it in India with substantial transfer of technology.
So would you say defense is the pillar of the India-French relationship? I mean, like you mentioned a lot of other areas, but defense is the main thing here.
The traditional relationship, traditionally, we refer to tripod in the Franco-Indian relationship, which is defense, nuclear, space. These are three things which have happened for the last 40, 50 years. So this is the tripod of the relationship, with defense perhaps being the most important, you can say that. Although I have to say, even space is an area where France has really helped ISRO very significantly in launching satellites and so on. There is no question. From the 60s onwards, there has been solid cooperation between the two countries. So this is the traditional tripod. The new areas for me are energy, and which can include a lot of things like green hydrogen. The cities, for example, urban city management. They have taken over two cities, Chandigarh and I think Kanpur, Nagpur, if I'm not mistaken. So two cities, smart cities, for example. France is heavily invested in the smart cities program. They are heavily invested in waste management, metro, for example, transport between two cities. So I think we can look to France for a number of these new areas, but the more exciting areas are cybersecurity, quantum, and artificial computing. As I said, there is a roadmap which has been established by the two leaders in these areas. France, it's not sufficiently appreciated by the English-speaking world that France perhaps has the best talent in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, pure mathematics, and so on. Unfortunately, they don't speak English, and the French, by tradition, by convention, or by characteristic, will not come to you and say we are the best. Their way of looking at it is, we know we are the best. Why should we tell you we are the Harvard, we are the Stanford? We know we are the best. So they have some top quality schools, which they call grand schools or grand école. And those schools in their École Polytechnique, for example, it is not like the Polytechnic of India, exact opposite. It is like the Indian Institute of Technology or MIT. They have some top quality experts in quantum computing and artificial intelligence. And I think India should make it a point to really try to see whether cooperation in STEM can happen. Because a lot of French people have now started speaking in English, and that should not be an insurmountable barrier. So for me, the new areas are more exciting. Artificial intelligence, quantum computing, cybersecurity, those I think give me a lot of hope that the relationship need not be just about defense, nuclear, and space. Important as these three are, I think we need to now expand the scope of cooperation between the two countries.
So has the time come for an FTA with France? I know we are negotiating an FTA with the EU, but what about a bilateral FTA?
So, Surya, the problem with the bilateral FTA is the European Union is a customs union. So we cannot have an FTA with individual partners because all of them have a common external tariff. The competence for free trade agreement lies only with the Commission. The French don't have the right to negotiate trade with India. We must appreciate that the right to negotiate trade with India lies in Brussels, not in Paris. And Brussels will take care of all the 27, 28 countries of Europe. So it is the FTA with Europe that is significant. I have already said in my writings that for me, it is absolutely a do or die moment for Indian trade policy. India needs this FTA much more than EU needs it. Take a simple example like garments. Vietnam will soon be exporting garments to Europe at 0% duty. India has a duty of 10%. Do you really believe we can compete with Vietnam? Already our manufacturing is not competitive. And we are not competing with Vietnam. We are competing with Bangladesh today. And to think that Bangladesh gets 0% duty because they are a least developed country, and Vietnam gets 0% duty because they've signed an FTA with Europe. How can India afford to export at 10%? And EU is our biggest market for garments today. So I don't see this as a choice. A lot of people in India keep telling me, no, no, we will see whether we can sign an FTA with Europe or not. I'm sorry, if you want to be a 5 trillion economy and a 10 trillion economy, and 40% of your GDP is foreign trade, I don't see how you can say, I don't see how anyone can say FTA with Europe is a choice. It's a necessity. So I hope India negotiates an FTA with Europe as quickly as possible. Some tough decisions have to be made, but I think we should do it sooner rather than later. We are doing two other things with EU, and the second one is an investment agreement, which is equally important because there are no takers for our great model bilateral investment treaty. There are no takers.
Yeah.
So we have to negotiate a world-class investment agreement with EU. And the third one we are doing is geographical indications in the context of intellectual property rights. In all these areas, France can help us. We can tell France that, listen, please share your concerns with us. We are happy to accommodate your concerns, but for God's sake, don't object to the FTA when it comes to the council meeting. And please help persuade other countries that India is important. The way I think India should convey this to EU is, we are helping you to de-risk vis-a-vis China. You are saying you want to de-risk. You were saying you want to reduce your dependence on China. Well, India is offering itself as an opportunity, but it also means India must make itself attractive. So some tough decisions have to be made at home as well. But I think strategically, France and some other countries get it. I think if the EU signs an FTA with India, it should be considered as part of the de-risking strategy of EU vis-a-vis China.
Great. So, come to my last question. Since you mentioned China, is there a meeting of minds between Paris and Delhi about China, Indo-Pacific strategy, and so on?
That's an excellent question, Surya. I think we have to be clear-headed about it. Our relationship with China, that is India's relationship with China, does not mirror EU's relationship or France's relationship with China. Fundamentally, their relationship is different. France is tied with China in terms of economics, commerce, and trade, which is why the EU, in a very famous statement, says China is our partner, competitor, and rival, all at once. I've been struggling to make sense of that, but that's where they are. That is their policy. So I think we have to be clear in India what to expect from France and EU and what not to expect. And if you give me 2 minutes, I'll tell you. As far as the land border is concerned, as far as boots on the ground is concerned, India is on its own. Yeah. We should be clear. We may ask for defense equipment. We may get it, provided we are willing to pay the price. I think that is something we have to accept. We should not expect any other country to come to our help. As far as the maritime theater is concerned, and you mentioned Indo-Pacific, but forget the Pacific, I will talk more about the Indian Ocean. That is where France can really help us. Because if there is a problem on the land border, you don't want a two-front situation where you have a problem in the Indian Ocean and you have a problem in Ladakh. That is why India should actually be having a serious conversation, which we do with France now, on the Indian Ocean. China's view on Indian Ocean is interesting. I was at a conference in Shanghai some months ago when a professor from China said, it is Indian Ocean, it is not India's ocean. I thought that was interesting. He said that. He said that. It's an Indian Ocean, we accept, but it is not India's ocean alone. So from 2008, China has had a semi-permanent presence in the Indian Ocean, which should worry us. because it's our backyard. France and India see eye to eye with regard to the maritime theater. We may not see eye to eye with regard to other things about relationship with China, but with regard to Indo-Pacific and the Indian Ocean, I think we see eye to eye. Both France and India believe in two things. One, they want a rules-based international order in the maritime area, which means, basically no unilateral measure to change the status quo. You follow UNCLOS, United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, and so on. Freedom of navigation, freedom of overflight, etc. We also don't want an Indo-Pacific which is not multipolar. That is, we don't want a hegemonic situation in Indian Ocean. And you know which hegemony I have in mind.
Yeah.
So I think on those, France and India see eye to eye. France has got the largest real estate in Indian Ocean. Most Indians don't reckon with that. If you take Reunion Islands, Mayotte, etc., they have the largest exclusive economic zone in the Indian Ocean.
Absolutely.
Much more than India. So I think we will have to really have a substantive dialogue with France. We do. They were the first to post a liaison naval officer at the Information Fusion Center in Gurgaon. So there is a meeting of minds in the maritime space between India and France, which I think should be strengthened.
Ambassador Kumar, we are at the end of our time, but great talking to you, great perspective. Thank you very much, and looking forward to the Prime Minister's visit. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for having me.
And for those of you who joined us on this conversation, do subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter and social media. Thank you very much. Good night.